Morning. Morning, everyone. Morning po.
Morning po, sir.
Sorry.
Morning, sir.
Currently nasa ano po kayo, casa. Maintenance po ng sasakyan, but I requested for a room para po makapag-klase po tayo habang hinintay po matapos yung sasakyan. Anyway, again, good morning po sa ating lahat. So I wasn't able to meet everyone I hope I'm clear kasi naka-hotspot lang ako. I wasn't able to meet everyone last Saturday, and I also na-miss-send pala, hindi pala na-send yung listahan ng mga reports. So I'll just send them after our discussion for today. Now for today, we'll have our first topic on basically this is the basis of environmental crop physiology. So we'll have a short discussion on the ecology, then we'll proceed with the environmental plan in general, environmental plant physiology. So I hope everyone is ready. So this might be a very short discussion, I think. Very straightforward naman to. But after our discussion, I'll leave you an activity uh, to work on. So, ready na po ba? Ready na po ba tayo? Okay, so let me just pull out my material. Sir Joel, nasa PSAU po kayo last week. Last week tama po. Nabanggit ni
Yes,
Sir
sir.
Walter.
Meron po. Opo. Sayang nga po nabanggit nga niya nandun daw kayo pero parang busy yata kayo last week.
Oo. Sabi nga niya, kaya sabi ko po, ang dami ko kasing ginagawa last week. Wait lang po. This will just be a 27 slide presentation. So, mabilis lang po ito. Malaki naman po yung mga font style na ginamit ko. So, we'll not dwell more of our time on our topic. Clear po ba ako? Sorry, parang feeling ko mahina yung internet ko.
Nag-choppy po kayo, sir.
Ayusin nga po yun. Hello po. Yan. Clear na po ba?
Medyo pa wala pa rin, sir.
Great lang. Hello. Good morning. Clear na ba? So I'll just turn off my video for the meantime. Abang baka kasi Nagkakos ng ano. Hello? Clear ba ako?
Yes,
Medyo
sir.
choppy po,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Medyo choppy pa rin ba?
Tolerable na, sir.
Okay, sige. We'll just make this quick para po to maximize our time this morning since I'm just using also my hotspot for our discussion for today. So kindly bear with me with our discussion. Gawin na natin siyang mas straightforward. Okay, so again, this is CS301, Environmental Crop Physiology. And our first topic is on the environment and ecosystems, the physiological basis of ecology. So if we will look into the title of the chapter, ang pag-uusapan natin is more on the ecological aspect of this environmental crop physiology. So the following subtopics are, are these are the following subtopics. So we have the luminosphere, the biosphere, the organism environment relationships. We talk about what is environmental physiology in general, then the climate and its changing behavior, as well as the scope of environmental plant physiology and the applications in food production. So since medyo technical po ito ng konti, so just kindly tell me if hindi po clear yung ating audio. Okay, so let's start. Okay, what is luminosphere? Sino po yung nakaka-recall kung ano po yung luminosphere? Any idea? Baka po merong nakakaalala. What is luminosphere? Okay. Baka this is just like parang new term ba sa atin, itong luminosphere. Okay, so let's discuss what is luminosphere. So luminosphere, it actually refers to the universe. So the universe is, it says na this is the home of light. So the luminosphere or photosphere accommodates the countless galaxies, and each galaxy accommodates countless stars, and each star generates an infinite amount of radiation by means of nuclear reactions. And in this is this radiation that illuminates the whole of its home, the luminosphere, that keeps going on. So yung pong luminosphere, it refers to the universe itself. So it nandyan yung basically nandyan yung light, and it has the several nuclear reactions occurring, leading to different spheres. Now, in connection to the luminosphere, ang sinasabi sa luminosphere, continuous. It's not static, but the, the luminosphere, yung evolution niya, it's continuous. And one of the result of the nuclear reactions is the creation of the biosphere. Now, the biosphere, it comprises, so this very ecology, it comprises the variety of communities of plants, animals, and microorganisms of the earth that are integrated into this single stratum. Yun yung tinatawag natin na biosphere. So biosphere, it came from the word bios, life, and spharia, which means sphere. So it refers, by definition, it refers to the stratum of Earth's surface extending from a few kilometers into the atmosphere to a few kilometers into the seas and oceans that supports and sustains life. So, ibig sabihin, dito po sa biosphere, nandiyan yung life. Now, the biosphere includes several components. So we have the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, and the atmosphere. So in essence, this is the sum of all the ecosystems of the Earth. So yung ating biosphere, it is solar powered, which means para po umandar ang isang engine just like a biosphere, it needs light. So solar energy ang ating ginagamit. Now, by means of converting solar energy into biochemical energy, ito yung tinatawag natin, popularly known as the photosynthesis. Now, pagdating sa organism and environment relationships, I know you are already familiar pagdating po dito. So, ano yung madalas po natin narinig pag pinag-uusapan yung organism environment relationships? Usually, we hear it from yung symbiosis, we have mutualism, we have predation, we have herbivory. So, these are sort of the relationships. Now, yung organism po natin, it constitutes the smallest level of ecological hierarchy, which means it starts, ito yung, pagdating sa ecosystem, ito yung smallest uh, ito yung smallest level. We are referring now already to the ecological hierarchy, not the biological hierarchy. Kasi sa biological hierarchy, ang lowest po natin is the cell. Now, it may be in the organism, maybe unicellular or multicellular, but of course, an organism, sinasabi dito, it's not an independent entity. Meaning, meron siyang interaction with its surroundings. For the organisms to survive, for the organism to sustain and conduct other essential activities. Now, on all organisms on the planet, familiar tayo dito. We know the biotic, abiotic components of the environment. So the interaction of which the biotic and abiotic components of the environment, ito yung the study of the interaction of biotic and abiotic components, ito yung nire-refer natin as ecology. So ibig sabihin, yung ating for an organism to survive just like a plant, it interacts with its environment at para mabuhay siya, para mag-survive siya. So, ganun yung relationship ng isang organism at saka ng environment. Ibig sabihin, as mentioned in the previous slide, the organism, a single organism, is not independent, meaning it is always dependent on its environment. Now, ang pag sinabi din natin environment, it actually an integrative concept. So, pag sinabi natin integrative, it is composed of different systems. And one example is an ecosystem. So, isang example, pag sinabi natin system, ibig sabihin meron siyang different components. So, some of its components, mainly, meron tayong abiotic and biotic. Now, the interaction of which, bumubuo yun ng isang system, which is commonly known as an ecosystem in an environmental perspective. So doon nakikita that the abiotic and biotic components, they are inseparable, meaning yung interaction nila, it will always be in existence. Now, the quality of the physical environment has implications on the living organisms. And the living organisms have bearing on the quality of the physical environment. So we can see in here the relationship of the organism and the environment. Sinasabi that kung ano yung kalidad ng ating physical environment, it will always affect doon sa pamumuhay ng mga iba't ibang organisms, just like the plants. Now, we'll not dwell too much of this because very elementary itong mga to. So we have the abiotic components, we have the biotic components. So what are these? For the biotic components, we have the green plants, the non-green plants, the symbionts, the parasites, the animals, the human beings, and the composers. Now, abiotic components, we have the climatic factors. These are your radiation, heat, temperature, atmospheric gases. Pagdating naman sa edaphic factors, we're talking about anything about soil. That includes formation, composition, types, profile, and physical properties. Now, pagdating sa organism-environment relationships, it can be reflected with the following. So we have the energy and nutrient flows. So paano, who can recall po, paano yung energy and nutrient flows pagdating sa isang ecosystem? How does it happen? Or recitation. Who can recall po?
Sir?
Yes po. Yes, ma'am.
Through respiration and photosynthesis po.
Okay, so the basic energy and nutrient flow, thank you po, Ma'am Bahas. The basic, it's the energy and nutrient flows is through the respiration and photosynthesis. Now, significantly for the plants, for the crops, photosynthesis and respiration, napaka-importante po nito. Now, for other organisms, especially those living under the sea, so they undergo chemosynthesis. So these are how the energy is being transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level. And this transfer of energy and nutrients, it happens through food chains and food webs. Siguro wag na po natin i-detalye itong food chains and food webs because this is very high schoolish, elementary. So we can, for these two concepts, alam ko, basic na to in our level. Now, ang pinaka-main rule, the rule of thumb, pagdating sa energy and nutrient flows, it always happens, sinasabi at 10%. There's a 10% rule. Now, yun lang yung energy na na-transfer from one trophic level to another trophic level. So that is the basic, that is the rule of thumb. But that is not the kumbaga, definitive sum pagdating doon sa how and how many energy. But by principle or rule of thumb, 10% lang ng energy from one trophic level to another trophic level yung nata-transfer. Now, the organism-environment relationships can also be represented by the food chains and food webs as mentioned a while ago. And dito pumapasok yung different symbiosis. So symbiotic relationships. This includes mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, predation. Now, in particular, pagdating sa plant physiology, herbivory, yung pinag-uusapan natin because we are talking about plants. Then, lastly, we can also represent yung organism-environment relationships through what we call the ecological pyramids. So ecological pyramids, it was devised by Charles Elton. Now, the shape of the pyramid, it shows the characteristics of the different trophic levels or different species in a certain ecosystem. So it may be upright or straight, it may be inverted, spindle shaped. But what does this mean? It's just conveying the nature of the organism-environment relationship. So it may be according to number, biomass, or energy. So yung nasa screen po natin ngayon, what you can see in the screen, this is the carnivore, herbivore, and producers relationship in a terrestrial ecosystems. So sinasabi dito, by number, mas marami ang producers rather than the herbivores and the carnivores. Now, another ecological pyramid is the pyramid of biomass. So dito naman, this is also in the terrestrial ecosystem, but we are referring to the biomass. So the mass of the total mass of the organisms present in an ecosystem. So we have the producers, herbivores, carnivores, and top carnivores in here. So sinasabi that in terms of biomass, mas marami yung mga producers over than the other species. Then lastly, this is the pyramid of energy. Ito po yung binabanggit ko na the usual rule of thumb is the 10% only being transferred from one trophic level to another. So halimbawa, solar energy. Yung po solar energy, it was used by the grass for photosynthesis. Now, itong 15 calories, it will be transferred to once nakain siya ng rabbit, ang ma-obtain niya lang is 1.5. So this is the rule of thumb, 10%. Bakit tingin po ninyo? Why there is only a 10%? Bakit yun yung rule of thumb pagdating sa transfer of energy? Because this is very important pagdating sa food chain, food webs when we talk about this. Any idea po? Why? Why there's 10% only, the rule of thumb?
Sir, siguro po dahil po ginagamit din mismo nung plant or animal na yung mismong energy.
Okay, that is correct. So, aside from yung na-obtain ng organism na energy, let's say from the grass, from the grass, na na-obtain niya from the solar energy, ginagamit niya rin ito for the processing of its own food, for the processing, and then other processes eminent for the organism to survive just like the grass. So, ibig sabihin, yung 90% nagagamit siya at yung 10% lang yung pwedeng ma-obtain. Another reason is not all parts of an organism can be eaten. So ibig sabihin, di ba, kung ah, kung yan ay isang hayop, pag na-consume yan, hindi naman lahat ng parte ng hayop ay makakain. Even in plants, not all parts of the plants can be eaten. So that is the basic principle. Bakit they are following the 10% rule pagdating doon sa transfer of energy from one trophic level to another trophic level. Now, let's continue. Thank you, Sir Jan. Now, meron din daw tayong tinatawag na sixth trophic level. Usually, this is not being discussed or this is not being considered pagdating sa isang food web. Parang lagi itong na-overlook. But the decomposers, they are considered as the sixth trophic level. And they are very much important in any ecological pyramid or in any food chain because this is where the organisms return to its original pool. So this is what we call the mineralization. So kumbaga dito nang galing yung sila yung pinaka-importante component ng one of the most important component of the trophic levels wherein ibabalik ng minerals, yung minerals na nasa isang organisms, babalik siya doon sa pinaka-original form niya. And that is what we call mineralization. Kumbaga, dito yung sinasabi po natin na babalik ka rin sa lupa. So, any plant, once decomposed, the minerals will be in the soil. Now, we also have the seventh trophic level. According to certain sources, the highest form or the topmost in a topmost trophic level are actually the human species or the human beings. So they are considered as the major consumer of the Earth's natural resources. Now, in terms of in which group or category does human species belong? According to sources, morphologically and anatomically, human beings are
Fully charged battery,
herbivores.
fully charged. Unplugged charger.
Now, the human species does not only consume yung 5 trophic levels, kaya sinasabi na sila yung topmost, but also consume the 6th trophic level and those are the microorganisms. Paano? Paano natin masasabi yun? It's because, diba, we use yeast in producing alcohol, bread. So, ibig sabihin, microorganisms are also being consumed by the human beings. Now, why we are talking about this ecological basis? Because napakita natin dito with the interactions of the organisms and environment, nagbabago din yung physiological response ng isang species. So kung ano yung nasa environment, internally, the internal processes of an organism will also change. Now, dyan pumapasok yung ating topic po for today. So this is, yes, correct. Tama po si Sir Las. We have the probiotics also sa mga ating mga yogurt and other probiotic milk, probiotic drinks. So dyan pumapasok yung ating konsepto, yung pinaka-major area that we are talking about, the environmental physiology. So by definition, pag sinabi po natin environmental physiology, we are talking about the biochemical processes taking place in organisms and their coordination with the physical environment, leading to various functions performed by the organisms. So these functions are actually the results of the processes going on with them. So kung ano yung processes na nasa isang organisms internally, nangyayari yon because of the physical environment. So environmental physiology, in short definition, it is the science of organisms' functions as influenced by their physical environment. So yan po yung topic natin. But in our subject, we are basically talking about crops. Now, generally, plants. So, any questions po? Or mabilis akong magsalita? Okay. Now, ibig sabihin, when we are talking about yung ating environmental physiology, one key player nito ay yung climate. So, climate is the key player in determining the thermodynamics of the biosphere. Now, if the climate is changing, now the organism, any organism will tend to adapt to that. So, upon adaptation, yung ating internal processes happening, biochemical processes happening inside the organism, nagbabago din yun. Kasi kailangan niyang mag-survive. So in this sense, ito yung tinatawag natin na generally, this is what we call the evolution. So, pero magkaibang konsepto po yan. But there are two interconnected concepts, evolution and adaptation. Now, evolution, ito yung usually na tinatanong kapag pinag-usapan yung evolution. Yung kailan magkakaroon ng evolution? Kapag ba nag-adapt ka, that is already an evolution. No. There is a particular evolutionary year na year kung saan nagkakaroon lang ng evolution. If it only happens, if the adaptation only happens in a singular organism, in a single species, hindi yung lahat ng species, there by then hindi pa natin yung masasabi as an evolution. Okay, so ibig sabihin nag-adapt lang sila sa isang ecosystem. Now, a change in the climate phenomenally influences the physiology of organisms, mapahayop yan or plants. Organisms first tend to adapt to the climate changes. If the climate change is too drastic to allow organisms to adapt, they tend to migrate to regions of favorable climate. So ito yung usual na ginagawa ng mga mobile organisms just like the birds. Now, by looking into this, we can say that the climate behavior results in the characteristic growth patterns, reproduction, survival, and sustainability of living organisms, more so the ecosystems. So malaki po yung factor. That's why climate change and global warming, these are the two main issues that are being tackled globally. So, dito tayo nag-gear towards. Now, when climate behavior undergoes changes, the normal patterns of life tend to undergo changes as well. So, ganun din, kung makita po natin, even yung human beings, at first, when you go to a new place, you tend to acclimatize first. So mag-acclimatize ka muna, ibig sabihin, there are some changes. Yung iba lalagnatin kapag bagong lugar yung pinuntahan nila. That's how you adapt to the environment. So ibig sabihin, merong internal changes na nangyayari. And the physiology of an organism, yung biochemical processes, the physiology of an organism also changes for this organism to adapt to this changing climate. Now, pagdating sa scope of environmental plant physiology, napakaganda niyang pag-usapan because, in particular sa plants, because it deals with how we can work on doon sa climate crisis that we are experiencing right now, especially in this kind of world that we have. So, the crisis of the environment created twists in these vital relationships, and the deviation in these relationships also precipitates into socioeconomic and cultural crisis for the humanity. So, ako as I'm an environmental science practitioner, and one of my advocacies is the link of the environment and the human beings. So, there are always school of thought na the school of thought na human beings are highest form of the organisms, and we tend to separate us. We tend to separate human beings tend to be separated when being tackled in terms of what is an ecosystem. But nowadays, we have to deal everything in a socio-ecological perspective, wherein kasama dapat ang human beings do sa equation pagdating doon sa pagsosolve ng isang problem. Because generally, it is the anthropogenic activities that causes a lot of changes in our environment. Yun yung pinupunto. I've been uh, I've been parang usually lagi natin sinasabi, halimbawa ecosystem, but in reality, in terms of conservation, the ecosystem cannot conserve itself. It's still the human beings that will do the conservation, that will do the management. And if you tend to remove the human beings in the equation, parang nababaliwala yung mga conservation aspects. That's why personally, my advocacy is to to put into the connection, the nexus of the human beings and the environment. Kasi they are two inseparable concepts. Kasi ako po ganito, there are a lot of technology. This is my own perspective. It may be in contrary to your practice. It may be contrary to your belief. But ang dami nating technology for the past years. Ang daming technology na nabubuo. The USTP card has a lot of technologies that produced that are produced, but even internationally ang daming ginagawa ng mga researchers, but there are some technology that fail. There are some technology na nagfa-fail sila. Bakit? Because they do not capture the need on the ground. Maraming nagfa-fail na technology because ano ba siya explain? Usually, when we craft a project, when we craft a research, we tend to think na ito yung problema on the ground, but in reality, hindi siya yun yung problema. So, ibig sabihin, we do not hit the problem when we do projects. So, yun yung parang gusto kong ipunto dun sa in-explain ko kanina that there are some technologies na nag-fail na because it is not being accepted by the community. Because we tend to think as a scientist, we tend to think as an academician, we tend to think on the level of in our perspective, wherein pagdating doon sa ground, hindi naman yun yung talagang problema. So that's what I'm trying to say. Na and environmental plant physiology, it's very much important aspect pagdating sa ating food security. So considering we have this climate crisis, if we know how the biochemical processes of a certain plant, we can plant crops in a desert. So, yun ba konsepto? So, I hope I'm making sense. But these are just my perspective. You may have your own perspective pagdating dito. But that's how I see things. We have to look uh, yes, I think tama po, Sir John. Maybe because certain projects are not deeply rooted based on industry and market needs. Some researchers tend to solve problems that are not problems at all, solving the wrong problem. That's very much what I'm trying to say. That's very much, those are the words that I'm trying to say. Na there are a lot of researchers that solving the wrong problem, or they tend to misjudge a certain situation. That is very dangerous kasi di ba, in terms of statistics, we may tend to produce false negative and false positives results. At kapag sinabi na, ang pinaka-dangerous doon ay yung mga false negative results that we tend to claim that the problem is not existing at all. So yun yung mas delikado kasi kapag ang assumption natin that the problem is not really happening at all, ibig sabihin na hindi natin yung gagawa ng solution. So thank you for sharing your idea, Sir John, Sir Joel. Okay, so let's continue. So pwede ka makapag-debate sa akin, but I will stand by my principle that we have to look at things on the socio-ecological perspective at present, because human beings are always part of the equation to begin with. Okay. So these are the things that is usually being tackled in terms of talking about environmental crop or plant physiology. So response of plants to various environmental factors. For example, yung light, temperature, winds, altitude, pollutants, and climate. So energy utilization by plants, photosynthesis, chemosynthesis, and energy budgets. Nag-usapan din yan. The nutrient requirements of plants is very much important. Absorption and transportation of nutrients. The water needs of plants, the seed germination, growth, flowerings, reproductive cycles, and growth movements in plants. Synthesis and breakdown of various metabolites in plant cells. The plant ability to adapt to adverse environments, just like the desert. Use of plant physiology as a tool in the mitigation of environmental pollution and climate change. This, um, Now, how these ideas are being applied in food production. So, before tayo mag-proceed dito, I would like to hear from you. So, kasi we are in the field of agriculture, how do you think that environmental crop physiology will be helpful in food production? Para po, marinig ko kayo. So, who wants to start first?
Sir, may I po?
Yes, Sir Joel.
Sir, I'll try to provide input po in a very general laymanized sense po, no? Kasi this is a very highly technical subject matter. Pero in a very practical sense po, kasi yung environmental physiology is very fundamental kasi gawa nga po, example sa amin sa DA, bago ka makapag-introduce ng certain new varieties sa field, ay kagaya po nung dinidiscuss namin do sa isang subject, farming. This is also very important in farming systems. Kasi hindi po tayo basta-basta makakapag-introduce ng makabagong variety kung hindi siya adapted dun sa lugar na paglalagay niya. Kaya tama po yun, kanina marami po kayo nabanggit, yung interaction between the biotic and abiotic. That is very basic po. You have to know first what is the existing soil, the soil type, the soil health condition. You have to cure first the soil. You have to make sure there is water. Then, what is the existing situation there? Yung biophysical, agroclimatic situation doon. Before we can really and properly introduce whatever technology that is, probably in the form of a new improved variety. And I also heard, sir, maybe this is also connected. Kaya nga po ito po ay na-encounter ko, naaalala ko lang po ngayon. Dahil doon po sa mga basic subject po natin nung nauna at ngayon, naririnig ko po to sa mga breeder palagi, yung importansya ng G by E. The performance is really dependent on the interaction between the genetics and the environment. So talagang hindi po natin pwedeng alisin po yon. So that's why itong environmental physiology is very important. Kung gusto po natin talagang may improve ang food production, kailangan we have to have a clear understanding of the basic environment where the particular whether it's plants or animals, will they really survive? Will they really perform optimally? Yun po, kaya nga po kanina, nabanggit ko sa comment ko, sometimes yung mga researcher naglalagay lang doon, ginagawa nila, nagpupush ng technology. Where in fact, there is such a thing as push and pull. Kailangan we understand what the ground is telling us so that we can properly balance our intervention. Yun sir, just a very humble lang po. Is very pasensya na po, very general yung paliwanag ko, no, kasi this is really a very technical subject. Salamat po, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights, sir. I think that is on the research perspective as well. Tama po yun. Don't worry, sir. Pare-pareho tayo inaaral din itong subject matter. So, we have our own, parang ito yung gusto ko when we talk, kasi we have our own perspectives that we can share on. It may be in contrary to what we believe, but it doesn't mean na mali siya or tama siya. it is based on the experiences we have on the ground. So, yun po. Thank you, Sir Joel. Who wants to share next first po? Next. Sino pong gusto mong mag-share?
Sir,
Yes po, Ma'am
sir
Teresita,
ako
Ma'am
po.
Bahas.
Sir, pagkaintindi ko po dito sa environmental plant physiology, mahalaga po na maintindihan natin yung mga responses ng mga halaman sa environmental stressors. Kasi po minsan, akala ng mga farmers, may sakit kaagad yung palay na cause ng insect, sakit na mga bacterial diseases, ganun po punjay. Pero yun po pala, response lang po pala yun ng halaman doon sa environment kung masyado pong mainit, ganun po sir.
Yeah, tama. Thank you for sharing. Especially with the advent of climate change, as in stress yung mga plants, as well as stress din yung mga tao. So, I mean, knowing such things like this, how they interact, we know how to solve them, or we will be able to know how to deal with them. So tama po. Thank you, Ma'am Teresita, Ma'am Bahas, for sharing also that aspect. So thank you po. Next. Sino po? Next. Susunod. Para recitation to. No?
Sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes po. Siguro sir, dagdagan ko lang din kasi kami po as project implementers of different researches, specifically sa location pagiging specific natin sa location, napakagandang makita natin kung ano po yung angkop ba na ilagay. So kami po, lalo na ako sir, magagamit ko tong project subject na to when it comes to planning or designing mga research projects that are on rural development.
Yes.
Ayun po, kasi nakikita ko yung ano ba dapat ko ilagay, paano sila mag-interact for this ano po.
Yeah, especially on your field, on rural development, diba? How are we going to explain these technical aspects to the farmers for them to understand? I think that is a challenge also. Yeah, we know the aspects, we know technically na ito yung nangyayari, but how can we explain it in a laymanized form, in a layman's term, that enable in the language that the farmers or the fisher folks or those sectors involved kung paano nila ito maintindihan. Thank you, Sir John Eric. Dalawa na lang po. Sino pong mauna, Sir Ma'am Tricia or Sir Rafael?
Sige po, sir, ako na lang po.
Okay, ladies first daw po.
Okay, so ito po yung isa sa battle cry namin as an agricultural technologist na po. Sabi nga po, and yung dapat yung ibibigay na seeds, sabi na nga ni Sir Joel, ay adaptable sa location na ng isang farmer. So, yung nahihirapan po kami, kahit nire-request po namin sa Department of Agriculture, especially para sa mga upland community po namin na magbigay po ng seeds na adaptable din sa location nila. But kahit binibigay po namin yung kahit nire-request po namin yung mga seeds na good for upland areas, yung mahirap, wala daw available na yung DA kasi yung mga seed growers, yung tinatanim lang po nila yung mga good for lowland production.
Okay. So market yung sometimes I think the problem there it's on the market. So dahil siguro mas konti yung nagpo-produce pagdating sa upland. These are the challenges of course that we need to work to. So ibig sabihin kailangan natin ng seed growers for those kinds of species or varieties that can survive or that will be able to adapt to these extreme environments or adverse environments in other terms. So yes, Ma'am Tricia, anything?
Yes po. Kaya lang po, sir. Opo. Kaya lang po sir, dahil wala nga pong available sa Department of Agriculture ng ganun sa program nila, yung ginawa po namin, nag-request kami sa field rice. Kaya lang binigay lang po mga 10 grams. So sabi namin, paano namin pararamihin? 5 varieties, tig 10 grams lang, 2 kutsara lang yata yun. Kaya yun yung isa sa battle cry po namin kung paano i-address talaga para ma-increase po natin yung production ng mga upland community po natin.
Thank you, Patricia. So I think merong gustong rebut si Sir John Eric.
Yun po. Actually, totoo po yung sinabi po ni Ma'am Tricia. Kaya po, isang problem nga po yun na kulang po yung seeds, specifically sa rice, pagdating po sa mga adverse conditions. Kaya po kami ngayon, we are launching a project kung saan we will seed produce. Siguro maganda rin po, Ma'am Tricia, na ma-look into din po ng munisipyo na makapaggawa ng community-based na sila mismo yung magiging seed system nila, community-based seed system. Kasi kami pinapaumpisa na sa amin yung pagpapatanim ng mga adverse condition of ng varieties dahil napakahirap po hanapin sa mga seed growers gawa ng napakakonti ng market. So I think it should start from us talaga. Okay po.
Thank you, John Eric. So one comment also from Sir Joel in the chat is we need a massive public seed system program. So I think it falls under the Department of Agriculture ito. So considering these challenges that we are experiencing on the ground and it is being voiced out to the appropriate agency. So kailangan nga natin itong seed system. And when ako kasi one of the indicators when I had my dissertation, one of my indicators also is the seed system. So yung how my study is on the resilience, socio-ecological resilience of the Candata swamp, particularly on the farmers, on the rice production aspect. Na encounter din to aspect na to na sometimes walang yung mga drought resistant variety, they are not present, or another is the indigenous or yung mga local varieties are also depleting. So wala tayong system dun sa area, wala silang system na ganun. And that is actually it cost the resilience of the community. So kasi kung wala yung food system, particularly on this aspect, masisira yung the ability of the community to bounce back from any perturbations. Thank you. That's a very good insight coming from you. So let's hear now from Sir Rafael.
Sir, para naman po sa akin, kailangan po talaga yung NY vision na malaman. It's important to know to improve the plant quality para po malaman natin kung ano yung mga nutrients na kailangan ng plants para ibigay natin sa kanila. Then to increase the production ng plants. At saka pag nag-apply po tayo ng mga pesticide para alam po natin to address yung mga insekto na kailangan nilang puksain.
Yeah, correct. So, sabi nga sa akin nung isa, sabi nila is, bakit ka magtatanim sa ano siya hindi mo kailangan alamin mo yung kalidad ng isang lugar para alam mo kung ano yung tatanim mo. So that's very much important. Now, if the plant or if the area, if the environment is not conducive to that, means you can resort to another species, another variety, or you can enhance the quality of that soil or area para maging conducive siya for the plant that you intend for the crop that you intend to plant. So thank you, Sir Rafael, for sharing. Everyone, thank you for the insights. mas ang ganda ng ganitong klaseng discussions because we do not just only learn from each other's perspectives, but also we 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 tend to be more critical on these aspects na napapaisip ka nga bakit nangyayari to on the ground at ano yung mga kailangan natin gawin in our own discipline or in our own practice. So of course, in our case, syempre, for the academy, challenge din ito for us to draft proposals, to draft projects that will be beneficial to a large scale. So, ayun. Thank you. Now, let's continue. So, these are just only few slides left. So, these are the application based on the reference that I'm using. These are the application of environmental physiology or plant physiology in food production. So, una, the knowledge of environmental plant physiology is important for choosing seasons and timings of crop plantation and making effective water management for agriculture. So, that's one. Next, the physiological studies will be can be the basis to determine the doses of chemical and mine fertilizers and growth regulators for better growth of the crops. I think ito yung binabanggit ko ni Sir Rafael a while ago. Then soil fertility management based on the applications of optimum amounts of fertilizers and root microbe interactions can be ensured. So with the use of the plant physiology, now, crop rotations, crop combinations, complementarity, and synergies between crops, different crops, or crop cultivars can be designed and exploited in accordance with various plant physiological parameters. Another is, yun, makakatulong din to sa weed control and pest management, as well as on the tissue culture of rare plants and micropropagation. So, particularly on the genetic conservation of genetic resources. Nabanggit ito ni Sir Joel kanina. Then, the principles in the plant physiology, environmental plant physiology, can be also applicable in greenhouse food production. So, yung mga hydroponics natin and other techniques or practices that we can do in terms of food production. It can also facilitate the selection of stress, drought, and disease-tolerant varieties. And lastly, yung production ng seedless fruits, off-season fruits. Challenge ito, I think, for all of the agriculture, especially yung mga nagma-mass production. Now, for PSAU, a challenge is to produce an off-season tamarind. Kasi yung demand, pagdating especially for the sour tamarind, mataas yung demand ng mga manufacturing companies. Yung gumagawa ng mga ginisa mix, yung mga sinigang mix. So this is a challenge for PSAU considering our flagship product is the tamarind. Another is yung nabanggit ko nung pinakauna that knowing crop physiology will be able to plant crops in deserts. So by looking into its water potential. And knowledge on environmental plant physiology also provides ways and means for crop management under biotic and abiotic stress. Now we can also select the seed varieties conducive to that kind of environment. Ito naman yung nabanggit ni Ma'am Tricia, tsaka nadagdagan ni Sir John Eric. Then environmental physiology, plant physiology is pivotal in terms of evolving and formulating adaptation strategies for agricultural production based on particular zones in tune with the changing climate. So ang ganda nito. Then lastly, it's a key value for implementing sustainable agriculture and ensuring food security for humanity, in which for the Philippines, if babasahin natin yung mga news that we tend to import rice now, we tend to import sugarcane and all, considering we are one of the top producers years back. I think looking into plant physiology can help us work on some activities or techniques or approaches dealing with food security or food production. Now, Napaka-importante po nito. I'm the plant physiology can help us to become a climate smart planet. So, ang laki nung scope, ang laki nung ang laki nung ang road ng ating gusto makita, climate smart planet. Now, it helps the knowing such these things, considering food security is already it's being threatened by the environmental crisis. By looking into the plant physiology, environmental plant physiology, we can tend to solve numerous issues pertaining to life. So, considering at present, yung crisis natin pagdating sa environment, ang sabi nila, if we cannot really solve the problem by 2030, there's no turning back now. Kailangan masolusyonan natin yung problem nito, yung environmental problem, climate change, by 2030. Kasi daw, if we cannot reduce yung impact ng climate change, wala na. It will go to its, kumaga, we are already on the tipping point of the impact of the climate change. So, kung ganun mangyayari, yung mga nakikita po natin sa mga movies, yung mga sci-fi films, it may really happen in the future. So Wall-E, I still remember Wall-E. It's a very memorable movie for me. Bata pa ako nung napanood ko yung Wall-E, and this is the thing that I recall about it, na kung di natin papangalagaan yung ating environment, it will really affect us. Especially the environment provides various ecosystem services, and one of which is food. So pagdating sa provisioning services, one of which is food, kung saan doon tayo nakasalalay para mabuhay. So water and food, importante po yan para mabuhay tayo. Okay, now this will be the activity that we'll be doing. This will not be submitted within the day, but I'll be asking you to submit it by next week. I would like you to create an essay on this environmental plant physiology as a climate smart for a climate smart planet. So the essay, let's just limit it to 300 words, maximum of 300 words, 200 to 300 words. It may answer the following issues. So yung essay, you can choose any of these questions that you would like to deal with, to kung yung gusto nyong makita. So it may, you cannot, parang hindi nyo naman kailangan sagutin lahat ng mga questions dito. But these are the questions that you may answer. So you can just pick out of this. So in 200 to 300 words essay. So what is, sorry, let me just read them. What is the nature of the relationships between the physical environment and the organisms? What happens when the operating environmental factors are extremely deficient or any extreme excess? So how are the physiological parameters affected by the operating environmental factors? When and how are the environment-plant relationships affected? So what could be the repercussions of extreme environmental conditions? How are various sorts of stresses developed in plants? What is the overall performance of plants, including food crops, attributable to? What could be the possible implications of a changing climate on plant physiology and plant production performance? How can the plants overcome environmental stress? What are the adaptation mechanisms helping the plants adapt to unfavorable environmental conditions and hospitable environments and changing climate? And how can the climate change mitigation processes be implemented and exacerbated? Then lastly, how can environmental plant physiology be instrumental in evolving strategies for a climate smart and sustainable world? So you may choose any of these questions that you would like to answer in doing the essay. So it may be your essay should be 200 to 300 words. So this, you have a way to craft this essay. But I would like to see a personal touch on it. I mean, mas gusto kong marinig yung perspektibo ninyo on this, incorporating your disciplines. So as researchers, as as implementers of our rural development projects, as part of the national government agency. I think that is more interesting to to infuse. It's more interesting to infuse in such essays. So, any questions po?
Sir,
Yes, sir.
Sir Chair, ayun. Okay, I was about to request kasi may black kaninang square na nakakat.
Yeah. Ayan, sorry.
Okay. Okay po, sir. Okay na po. Thank you.
And so I'll give you the list of these questions. I haven't enrolled you doon sa ating platform, but I will share the link in which you will be submitting yung pong ating mga essays by Saturday. By Saturday. Then the next Saturday, I will not be meeting you again on Saturday, but I will give that time for you to create your reports. So research day po natin yung Friday because I also have an important appointment prior. Matagal na po siyang na-create so I cannot say no to the appointment. Now, especially recently lang din po nibigay itong subject on our part. But I will not meet you. So telling you in advance that we will not meet on on Saturday, but that will be the deadline for the essay. Then you will have your time to do the reports. But the following week, ang gagawin po natin is we'll start with the micro reportings or yung ating the Pecha Kucha uh, reporting pagdating po dito. So tulad po nung nabanggit ko last time, well, we'll have 6 minutes for each reporter, more than 6 minutes, 6 minutes and 40 seconds po tayo in total, discussing an article related to that topic. So after our discussion for today, I will share yung topics. Nag-fail po pala yung message ko last Saturday. Okay, so questions po. I think we're good. Questions sa ating subject matter sa topic po natin for today. Very basic though, ecology. This is very ecology. So parang wala naman po siguro. So it's almost 12 noon. So I'll give the remaining time for you on researching on the topics dito para po makapagsimula na rin doon sa pagbuo ng essay. So I'm doing this because I want parang masyado naman ano yung 3 hours discussion. Let's have synchronous activity and asynchronous activity combination para po we can maximize our time as well every Saturdays, as well as I know we have a lot of activities pagdating sa ating mga sa ating mga trabaho and personal life. So ayun po, so you can do a screen capture of this. Dito pong again, i-correct ko lang to. This is environmental physiology for a climate smart planet. So yeah. So these are the questions again that you may answer in your essay. So again, I would like to gusto pong makita, it's a really personal opinion on this. So let's just limit it into 200 to 300 words. I'll be sharing a link doon sa Turnitin so that you can also scan for plagiarism if you want yung inyong article or yung essay. Okay? So, may I request po, if there are no questions, may I request for everyone to turn on their cameras so that we can have our documentation for today.
Kailan isa-submit, sir?
For the essay, it will be submitted next Saturday. So next Saturday naman po deadline. So you can start, you can have your lunch, then supposedly hanggang 1:30 po tayo, no? Pangit naman ang oras natin. Lunch break kasi siya. So, we can have your lunch, then you can start working on the essay if you want. Okay po. So again, mag-picture taking po tayo for our documentation for today. For reference din natin. In count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, isa pa po. In count of 3, 1, 2, 3. So again, thank you for participating in our class. I hope you learned from me because I learned a lot from your field as well. So nakikiram din lang din po ako ng room dito sa casa. So kailangan na po ibalik yung room 10 na nakagamit na po ako ng 2 oras. Okay, so again po, thank you and have a good lunch to everyone. Good day po sa atin.
Thank you po.
Thank you
Thank
po,
you, sir.
sir.
Sir, thank you po.